panelists on the stage. I would like to introduce you with the panelists. As a participants in this session, we have Dr. Dipalipan Joshi, Executive Director, Reserve Bank of India, for giving the keynote address. She's not able to make it to the conference, but we have her video recorded for this session. Then we'll have Mr. S.G. Anil Kumar, Chief Executive Officer, IFMR Trust, as a moderator for this session. We also have Mr. S. Raghu Vatsachari, Chief Regional Manager, Indian Overseas Bank, Dr. Rajneesh Das, Director, Catalyst Constellations, former Professor, IIM Ahmedabad, Mr. Atiur Rahman, EVP Mobile Banking, Mercantile Bank, Bangladesh, and also Ma'am Ashoka Chatterjee, Head, Institutional Finance, Bandhan Financial Services Limited. I would request Mr. Santanu Sengupta to give the opening remarks for the day. I request sir to please come on the stage.
Good morning, friends, ladies and gentlemen. We have a very long but fruitful day yesterday. We continue in the same vein, and there are mixed stations. This one is more of theoretical, what leads to what. The subsequent one will be more of interaction on what is happening on the ground and the way forward. And as we go down the way, we will be talking about what is possible, and at the end of the day, there is an award ceremony where Honorable Minister of State, Mr. Seelam, will be here. And there is an exciting award ceremony, as you know, and a lot of nominations have been filed. So a lot of you from the banks and other institutions and the government departments and the services, whoever has filed the nomination, please mark and wait with a bated breath at what's going to happen down the line. Introduction to this particular session doesn't, you have a very fair bit of academics with a background of ground realities as well. Professor Rajneesh has done phenomenal work in both academics as well as some ground reality with different organizations like UNDP, SIVA, and a whole lot of it. Anil Kumar, myself, we have started the inclusive banking way back. Then he has moved into the trust, ushering in MFI community. And the other members, I think Mr. Chari has come from the banking perspective. He will give his own perspective. And this session will start with a video presentation. As you all know, because the credit policy is on 29th, most of the RBI governors and deputy governors and executive directors have been embargoed not to move out of Bombay. So she had recorded a vision or whatever the statements. So it follows from that particular perspective, and we'll carry on forward. So engage yourself, and I will request elites, volunteers, organizers to get everybody's feedback form ready, because 2 Galaxy tabs are waiting for you to pick up the best 2 feedback form that will be, a lot of you will be decided by this lucky draw. So let's start. I will ask Karthik to take over and invite the panelists on the podium and start with the video presentation first to take off, and Anil will take over subsequently. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. With this, I invite the speakers on the stage. Mr. S.G. Anil Kumar, Chief Executive Officer, IFMR Trust. So please join us on the stage. Mr. S. Raghu Vatsachari, Chief Regional Manager, Indian Overseas Bank. Dr. Rajneesh Das, Director, Catalyst Constellations, former Professor, IIM Ahmedabad. Mr. Atiur Rahman, EVP Mobile Banking, Mercantile Bank, Bangladesh. Ma'am Ashoka Chatterjee, Head, Institutional Finance, Bandhan Financial Services Limited. We'll start with the keynote address by Dr. Dipalipan Joshi. I'll request the technical team to play the video.
Let's Technomedia for hosting this particular global conference, which I see has a galaxy of very eminent speakers like my guru, Dr. C. Rangarajan, Professor Swaminathan, and other stalwarts who are going to deliberate on this very challenging subject. I have been asked to discuss inclusive banking from financial inclusion to financial deepening. This is an issue which not only concerns us, but one which deeply interests and engages every thinking person in this country. Because this is the one ingredient which will take the country far forward. Financial inclusion is not new. It has formed the core of our policy commitments. But then we must understand that this is an increasingly difficult area. It's very important but very complex. So it does not offer simple solutions. In a country where nearly 50% of people are still not able to access financial products and services, credit cards are confined to the creamy layer, to very few, insurance is severely under. Financial inclusion is defined by the RBI as the process of ensuring access to appropriate financial products and services needed by all sections of the society in general and vulnerable groups such as weaker sections, women and low-income groups in particular, at an affordable cost, in a fair and transparent manner, through mainstream institutional players. What is the RBI's approach to financial inclusion? We have followed a planned and structured approach to address the twin issues of demand and supply. We have framed regulations with an objective of providing banking services to 6 lakh plus villages and to create an enabling environment for banks to do so. We are furthering financial inclusion in a mission mode through a combination of strategies ranging from relaxation of regulatory guidelines, provision of new products and supportive measures to achieve sustainable and scalable financial inclusion. Keeping in view the infrastructure prevailing in our country, that is 46 domestic scheduled commercial banks, 51 RRBs after amalgamation. We have cooperative banks, urban cooperative banks, regional rural cooperative banks. We have adopted a bank-led model. We are often questioned on this. So I hasten to add that we are completely model neutral. We are more comfortable with a bank-led model as banks are regulated, supervised by us, and because banks are under the Deposit Insurance Credit Guarantee Corporation, so the depositors' interests are protected at least up to 1 lakh, which is an amount we feel covers the vulnerable sections which we are targeting. Now you must understand that countries like Uganda, Tanzania, Malawi, Kenya have no banking structure in place. For them, it is a twofold choice. Either they start from scratch and build banking structures, brick and mortar banks, or they build a digital network. Now, digital network is ideal. We will also try to move towards it. But we are model neutral at the moment. We feel we can leverage the penetrative outreach and strength of our banking system, and going forward, we can also get into the information autobahn, which is definitely required. So, we are furthering financial inclusion in a mission mode through a combination of strategies, and we want to move very fast in this area. Our financial initiatives are ICT enabled, wherein doorstep banking services will be provided using handheld devices such as POS machines, point of sale machines, mobile phones, etc., which ride on delivery models developed by banks to best suit their requirements. Other players, such as mobile companies, corporates, etc., are also allowed to partner with banks in offering services collaboratively. Some of the banks have told us that they are working with major telecom service providers like Airtel, Vodafone, Idea, Tata Teleservices, etc., who work as business correspondents, leverage upon their retail network to extend the banking services. Going forward, this is going to become increasingly more important. Under the institutional mechanism put in place for financial inclusion, we have the Financial Stability and Development Council, which has an exclusive mandate for financial inclusion and financial literacy. A separate technical group on financial literacy is a very important adjunct for promoting financial inclusion, consumer protection, and ultimately financial stability. RBI has adopted an integrated approach where efforts towards financial inclusion and financial literacy go hand in hand. Apart from the initiatives taken by the Reserve Bank of India towards tackling the supply side issues, and I mentioned that in the FSDC we have a separate committee which is headed by the Deputy Governor, and we also have a Financial Inclusion Advisory Committee. Now this is a very important committee, and we assign a lot of value to the inputs we receive from the Financial Inclusion Advisory Committee, because we have representatives of civil society and people who are actually working at the grassroots in this committee. And then we have a committee, and this is also under the chairmanship of the Deputy Governor. At the state level, we have state level bankers committees. Then below the state, we have the district level committees where the lead bank officers, and below that the lead bank officers. Now that we are one of the few countries, I think there are only 34 countries in the world, which have adopted what is called a national strategy for financial education. We have done this, and we have done this under the aegis of the FSDC to address all the demand side issues arising in financial literacy. This strategy seeks to create awareness about formal financial services, impart knowledge about various products, and seek to convert this knowledge into behavior, with the objective of linking the illiterate, unbanked population with the financial system. So first we are trying to create an absorption capacity by stimulating the demand side, and then for the supply side we will meet these demands. Further, we are focusing on we are starting young, and we are not alone in doing this. All central banks across the world are doing this, because after the great financial crisis, there is an increasing realization that, you see, the people who were given loans were no income, no job. They were called ninja. This ninja had no idea of the terms of the contracts they were signing. So as long as the cycle was going up and the loans could be availed of very easily, liquidity was very light, interest rates were low, liquidity was easy, it was very simple. They could pay back their mortgages. But the minute there was a liquidity tightening and the Ferris wheel stopped, they were literally left hanging in the air, and that is why I like the image of the Ferris wheel, because see what it did to the world economy. It nearly brought everything crashing about our ears. And that is why, for financial literacy, we are now talking to youngsters, school children, and are standardizing national curriculum setting bodies, working with them to integrate financial literacy into the existing course curriculum. We are trying, now what have we done? What have been the special initiatives of the RBI? Because we say we are committed to financial inclusion, we are part of financial inclusion. So what we have done is, we have relaxed branch authorization. We have freed bank branching completely, but we say that 25% of all bank branches must, and I repeat, must be opened in unbanked, underpenetrated rural centers. Otherwise, bank branching is free, and you do not have to come to the Reserve Bank of India. as broadly include self-set targets in respect of rural brick and mortar branches open, business correspondents employed, coverage of unbanked villages with population of less than above 2,000. Now there is no population criteria. All villages must be covered. Then we say, we ask the banks, how many Kisan credit cards issued? How many general credit card issues? You report to us on a monthly basis. We consolidate data on a quarterly basis. And on a yearly basis, with our Deputy Governor in the chair, Dr. Chakravarti, we review how far you have gone. And we see your shortcomings and we try to work together as to how can we plug the difficulties arising. The important thing is that these financial inclusion plans are board approved. They are meshed with the corporate and business plans of the banks. So the banks have necessarily to do this. And we review. Now I am telling you this so confidently because I can tell you that since the last period, that is the projections of 10 to 13, year 10 to year 13 show me that nearly 2,68,000 banking outlets have been set up as on March 13, as against 67,694 banking outlets in March 2010. So see, we have travelled the distance from 67,694 to 2,68,000 banking outlets. 7,400 rural bank branches have been opened during this 3-year period in unbanked areas. 109 million basic savings bank deposit accounts have been added, taking the total number of basic savings bank deposit accounts to 182 million. The share of ICT-based accounts has increased substantially. Percentage of ICT accounts to total banking, basic banking accounts has increased from 25% in March 10 to 45% in March 13. With the addition of nearly 9.48 million farm sector households during the period, 33.8 million households have been provided with small entrepreneurial credit as at the end of March 13. With the addition of nearly 2.25 million non-farm sector households during this period, 3.6 million households, small entrepreneurial credit as at the end of March period. Now we come to the projected financial inclusion plan for the period 2000. Access to banking services in the remaining large unbanked areas of the country. Banks have been advised to draw up a fresh 3-year financial inclusion plan for the period 2013 to 16. Banks have also been advised to ensure that the financial inclusion plans which are prepared by them do not remain lost in their corporate folders. These plans must be disaggregated right down to the bank branch level. The focus under the new financial inclusion plan is now more towards increasing usage of financial deepening, increasing the volume of transactions, especially in the BC ICT accounts, by increasing the flow of products to the small value customers. Now, in this, financial literacy becomes very, very important. So we have said that, all the financial literacy centers, and we've already set up around 700 million of these linked to the bank branches in March 2013. These FLCs have educated 2.2 million people through various literacy programs in the last 1 year. Banks have been further advised to scale up financial literacy efforts and conduct outdoor financial literacy camp once in a month. We have standardized the curriculum of this, so each bank does not show different things. We have got a set of 16 interrelated posters through which in very simple language we try to tell the common person where should he save, what is a rainy day, why at all should he save with a bank, and we then give a financial diary to him where he can record what are his essential expenses and what are his inessential expenses. And we convey very simple messages. We say, okay, how many cups of tea do you drink? You drink 6. Drink 4. Of those 2, you can save the money. And you can have a financial goal. You save for a house, you save for your life cycle needs, marriages, deaths, and slowly you will find how your money will accumulate in a bank. What we say is that the poorest person can save, everybody needs to save, from the poorest to the richest. And if you save in a bank, you earn interest. If you take credit from a bank, you get a loan easily. If you take credit from a money lender, yes, you get the loan more easily. But then you are paying much more for that loan than you pay in a bank. So very simply we try to explain to them the concept of annualized interest and the concept of immediate recurring interest. We are also following these new bank licensing policies, and we've told the private banks also that this is essential for you to do. It is also very, very necessary. Now, all this is what we have done, but we are also facing severe challenges. We have challenges of not having built up a business case. With Aadhaar, with the direct benefit transfer system, we will get a business case. Once we get a business case, the efficient delivery model will follow. Because then it will be very clear how you can scope funds from the bottom of the pyramid, which will be a stable source of funding for the banks. Then we are also saying that all the applicants, now we are going to issue new bank licenses. I want to stress this because this is very important for all of you to understand, that we are saying that applicants for new bank licenses will be, applications are being evaluated on their track record in financial inclusion, and if they do not have an existing track record, what is the projection which they are going to do? How are they going to do financial inclusion? How will they, the new banks which are coming up, how will they penetrate to the rural areas? This is very, very critical. Now, see, the viability of the BC model and technology related issues are also there. So while nearly 2.70 lakh banking outlets are available across the country, the number of transactions are not increasing proportionately. Now, this is something which really worries and concerns me, because this reduces viability and impacts the scalability of the model. There are issues also with digital connectivity, which there will be in our country. This, coupled with delays in issuance of smart cards by the service providers, leads to severe credibility issues in hardware infrastructure. A broad overview of where we stand and what we try to do with financial inclusion. Now let me come to a few questions. The first of these many questions which I know would be agitating you is, why this bank-led model? Why do we have a bank-led model? So for three reasons. Firstly, bank deposits are guaranteed by the Deposit Insurance Corporation, and we feel that the depositor's money will remain safe and secure. Secondly, consider that we are dealing with clientele which has never used financial products and services from a bank, and therefore for them it is very important for us to ensure safety of their funds. So, because banks are regulated and well capitalized issues, this is the second reason, they are subject to RBI's direct control exercised through the processes of supervision and on-site and off-site inspection and regulation. This regulation is aimed at protecting the depositor's interests, orderly development and conduct of banking operations, and fostering of the overall health of the financial and banking system. Thirdly, and most importantly, we have huge penetrative outreach to these 87 commercial banks who have 72,116 branches, 20 private sector banks with 13,482 branches, 41 foreign banks, 331 branches, and representative offices. So we have the banking infrastructure and architecture in place, which we can successfully quadruple by linking with the business correspondent model and leveraging IT. However, I hasten to add, today we have a bank-led model. We need not, let me just say we are model neutral and we have substantially relaxed extant regulation and regulatory mandates. Had we not done so, we would not have been able at all to cover the distance which we have covered so far. You see, I have already discussed with you the introduction of the basic bank account, the liberalization of the KYC, the introduction of the business correspondent, and now the acceptance of the eKYC and the compulsory branching into these unbanked areas. That is 25% of the bank licenses must be opened there, and the new bank license applicants, and the imperative of financial inclusion which they have to embrace. Now let us come to products and services. I accept that it is a weakness that so far we have not been able to have products and services which are customized to the needs of the poor borrower and linked to his income streams. This is an area where we will have to innovate. Now gradually we have enlarged the number of people who can be the business correspondents. Initially it was just the individuals who were appointed by the banks. Then we said, all right, we will have non-profit Section 25 companies appointed by the banks. Then we went further. We said, yes, we can have corporates also appointed by the banks. Now we have said that, all right, funds collected, that is, funds collected by non-bank prepaid account providers, that in escrow account held in our regulated banks, with funds in these accounts isolated from the non-bank companies, core business. This can be done as long as you open this escrow account and isolate these funds from the work which you do. This is essential, and non-bank entities can, subject to this proviso, we allow them to issue semi-closed prepaid instruments. We have indeed prescribed transaction limits, but gradually you will notice that we have been increasing these limits. See, there are two kinds of things which we have to bridge. First, we have to bridge the fear of voluntary exclusion by increasing financial literacy. Voluntary exclusion occurs and imposes costs on households and families. The unbanked are cut off due to fear of price barriers, the cost of services, the need to frequently visit bank branches, foregoing days minimum wages, and then there are non-price barriers. Besides, the distance from the bank branch, which I have already spoken of, also include endless paperwork, endless documentations, restrictions on address, lack of KYC, defined address, clear income stream, etc. So far, we have been focusing on these areas and trying to work around these. Bank the unbanked is our principal slogan. Bank the unbanked. Once we surmount this, we will approach the digital divide. We do accept that till providers of services take the digital payments grid into the unpenetrated areas, poor and rural communities will remain entrenched in the cash economy or the penny economy. Now, this will be a very big wedge between India and Bharat, which clearly we don't want. So, what will happen will be that the cost of service provision to the poor entities will remain a challenge as opposed to the ease of transaction through electronic mode. So banks, insurance companies, utility providers will all find it cheaper to do business where there is digital connectivity. So this will be the second huge step which we will have to take beyond what we have done so far. Because we want India and Bharat to be on one frame. We do not want this increasing divide. Financial inclusion alone can pave way for this unification. Financial inclusion also allows the regulator to monitor all transactions which enter the formal economy rather than remain untraceable in the informal economy. Digital payments lead to a digital audit trail which will further enable this. I also want to share with you that international standard setting bodies like the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS, and the Financial Inclusion Task Force are putting guidelines in place to further expand access. So far, in the way forward, if we have to attain financial deepening, we have to address a few challenges. All the 6 lakh villages in the country must be covered, which are uncovered. Focus has to be on increasing the rural branches and opening accounts of all eligible individuals in the country. There are challenges of the BC model. Right now, the BC model is not being scaled up because we are confining the BC. We say that you first deposit 50,000. Now this 50,000 alone is going to be the limit on which you are going to operate. This is fine, it works, but it cannot be scaled up. After all, we don't tell the bank cashier that today I am just giving you 5,000 rupees, work with this. So similarly, we have to think a bit along these lines. Secondly, a steady revenue stream has to be there. After all, if this is the only work he is going to be doing, he also needs to get a remuneration. And the customer service points, the providers, the BC aggregators have to ensure that all the revenue, they do not keep all the revenue with them, they also part it to the feet on the street BC, because otherwise this becomes a problem. Now, if you are availing services from the BC, are you only the client of the BC or the client of the bank? You are the client of the bank. So what happens if the BC does not have cash or is not able to come? With the card which the BC has given you, you should be able to go to the nearest bank branch and do your transaction over there. Secondly, if there is a technological glitch in the machine, again you should be able to go to the bank branch. And the glitch should also be easily resolved. So the BC aggregator has to address all these issues also. Then, supervision of the BC, I have also stressed, is very necessary, and that is why we have issued the clear guidelines. Because once again I am repeating that the reputation risk is entirely of the bank. Now, as regards the transactions, these must increase. So, if you have to have financial deepening, if you want to have real financial inclusion, not paper inclusion, so you have to leverage on the direct benefit transfer implementation. You have to ride on the Aadhaar card. You have to experiment with innovation. You have to customize, have bespoke products. You have to give hassle-free emergency credit, just like you give the automatic overdraft, and issue the entrepreneurial cards. Then, to increase it from the demand side, financial literacy is essential. For that, the National Strategy on Financial Education, National Center for Financial Education, and inclusion of financial education in school curriculum become very important. So these are the challenges which will come in the way for financial deepening. You see, affordable financial services delivery is something which the banks must grapple with. Today, a chance to increase business opportunities by widening access to affordable financial services to those at the bottom of the pyramid presents itself before banks. People with low incomes typically require loans with short settlement cycles. These are hard to find, and these loans with short settlement cycles are very easily available. You see, the mistake which we make is we say that you are not getting financial services from mainstream service provider. You are getting financial services, but the poor person is getting them at a prohibitive cost. He gets financial services. He remits. He tells a man to take the money to his village, but that man can come back and say, I lost the money. That man can charge 200 rupees extra. That man can give the money, but give 15 days later. But a remittance will be immediate. He will give the money will be in the hands of his wife or mother at the same time. So now, money lenders are prohibitively expensive, and financial literacy and education will enable people to draw this distinction. This will be a short step, but a big step for the banks to offer customized and affordable financial services to the poor linked to needs and income streams. For banks, this will be a niche clientele. For borrowers, it will be an affordable legal option to transact through a bank and a first step to avoid the cycle of perennial debt and perpetual poverty in which they find themselves trapped. The banking industry has shown tremendous growth in volume and complexity during the last few decades. Despite significant improvements in all the areas relating to financial viability and competitiveness, I have serious concerns that we have not been able to resolve the access-usage conundrum. There is access but insufficient usage of accounts and banking services and facilities. Banks have as yet not succeeded in including vast segments of the population, especially the underprivileged sections of society, into the fold of banking services. Internationally too, efforts are being made to study the causes of financial exclusion as financial inclusion in the post-global crisis world has acquired a very sharp salience. Meager assets, inaccessible markets, scarce job opportunities lock people into material poverty, which is why promoting opportunity by stimulating economic growth, ensuring financial inclusion, making financial systems and financial markets work better for poor people, and building up their assets is the real key to poverty reduction. Unrestrained access to public goods and services is the sine qua non of an open and efficient society. As banking services are in the nature of a public good, it is essential that the availability of banking and payment services should be made available to the entire population without discrimination, and that this should be the prime objective of our public policies to move from financial access to financial deepening. I once again thank the organizers for this opportunity given to me for the selection of this very important theme, and I also like to thank the camera service provider who's been straining his arm, and the young lady who has come to my office, and your entire team who has helped me to be present with you, though not in real time, but to share my thoughts, ideas, concerns, and all these matters with you today. I thank this very good audience for a very, very patient listening. Thank you once again for having me, and I do hope that we are all able to renew our commitment to go from financial access to financial deepening. Thank you very much.
Partition in between the hall, I was wondering, maybe if yesterday was the access, today is deepening. You know, it's a shorter room. Perhaps the tables would get filled because there was no one virtually. Slowly, people started coming in. And as the keynote address progressed, we saw people slowly undoing the partition. So I was just thinking maybe now the barriers are
Us much more time, but given the time constraint, I thought that I will just focus on a couple of areas. Financial inclusion, if you talk about to summarize, when we started it, we found that a number of times what happens is that the question of financial literacy per se that we try to address, and we say that everybody is illiterate financially in this country, other than a group of us perhaps sitting in this room, is completely wrong. Had this been right, then why are taxpayers paying taxes for the loans that farmers have taken and never repaid, right? So those questions then needs to be answered. It basically means, in that case, is that if I, for example, as a farmer, if I have my daughter's marriage, and if the bank, and I have a bank account, but if the bank takes substantial amount of time to process my loan, I'm ready to pay an opportunity cost and rather take it from a moneylender because my daughter's marriage can't wait. Or if I have to buy fertilizer, then the buying of the fertilizer perhaps will not wait on the whims and fancy of a local branch manager in a village branch. We also went ahead and we started understanding that why is this this whimsical kind of phenomenon happening with in a lot of rural branches. And if you actually look at a lot of these branch managers, these branches are majorly, will have only 2 employees. A lot of these people are completely stressed out. They don't get any leave. They have to kind of work across the day, across the month, with more and more schemes being pumped up on the rural branches because that's where the control lies. It's actually a tough job. When you start coming to the supplier side, from the banks and financial institutes, it becomes a bit more clear, but there is madness. Because there are so many technology service providers. There are so many technology service providers, thank you. There are so many kind of different initiatives that happens. So we thought that we will try to put a method to the madness, thank you, thanks. And we took an ecosystem approach to understand that who are these ecosystem players in financial inclusion. Now, from a supplier point of view, from a bank's point of view, if you look at the major drive till date has only been how many branches are getting opened and theoretically how many villages are being covered by the number of people in those villages. When we started deep diving into the data of State Bank of India in their rural banking systems and a couple of other banks, we found that the value and the volume of the transactions that for all these new account holders were substantially low. Will you believe that the average value of the transaction, and I'm talking about middle of 2012, was as low as 1 rupee 20 paisa. Now, with an average value of transaction of 1 rupee 20 paisa, I do not think that any of the bank will be able to sustain any of these initiatives going forward. And there were a lot of other challenges as well. For example, because of the bank-led BC-driven model, the customers who are taken on board by the banking correspondents typically get a stepmotherly approach by the banks. So if I am a customer and I think I am a State Bank of India customer because somebody from ECO has got me onboarded, if the banking correspondent vanishes, because getting a banking correspondent who travels in those rural areas is actually very tough physically, and I am into one of the nearby markets, and I think that, oh wow, this is a State Bank of India branch, this is my bank. I try to go in and try to do banking there. I am broadly shooed away, saying that you do not belong to this bank, to this branch, but you belong to something else, which as a villager I hardly understand. So taking the ecosystem approach, when we started looking at, I do not think this is visible. We saw that, so we typically started looking at it from a citizen's perspective. And we saw that there are different types of players in the ecosystem that are trying to achieve different objectives going forward. So while there are banks and there are non-banking financial institutes, which includes all the microfinance service providers, post offices, primary agricultural cooperatives, district rural banks, regional rural banks, UCBs, a plethora of such financial service providers, not taking into account the moneylenders, sahukars, chettias, baniyas. There were other types of service providers. For example, there now has been a substantial number of IT service providers. There have been regulators coming in place. While RBI is a regulator, TRAI is also a regulator because there has been some interest in driving IT-driven kind of financial inclusion. And there are very distinct linkages between these different ecosystem players. Now, while going through this, one of the key findings, which I thought that will be interesting to some of us sitting in this room, is that the very question of financial inclusion, when we say financial inclusion, we also then accept that there is an mean that there is a financial exclusion that is there, but then there are different layers of ecosystem that exists. So, and these different layers of ecosystem depends on, on different parameters, although perhaps needs to be looked at it a bit more deeply if we would need to do an ecosystem prospecting, which comes into play. Then there are the presence of the ICT infrastructure, there are demographic characteristics, which talks about education, connectivity, access to highway, all these demographics kind of come in. And so some of these factors then drives that there are different layers of ecosystem. At least we were able to find around 7 types of ecosystems that exist. One being the zero state, which that there is nothing and nothing of nothing, to the other extreme of the ecosystem where the bank-led dream of having everybody connected and everybody having a bank account, and but there are different layers in between. Another interesting thing, because before I kind of close this, is that we also saw that how do one ecosystem move into another ecosystem is typically there is some kind of escape velocity that exists. For example, take this case. There is this credit cooperative society called Adarsh Credit Cooperative Society. Used to operate majorly in Rajasthan and Gujarat, and now they have gone into Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh. Given the fact that mimicry is one of the major driving forces for technology adoption, they wanted to mimic some of the large banks, because with the financial inclusion and the bank-led model and only the number of branches being opened, they very soon saw that deep in Rajasthan as well as in Gujarat, there are some ICICI branches, there are some other bank branches that are coming up. Now, to compete with those kind of branches, they thought that they also would need a core banking system. Before this thought, if you look at the way they used to do banking, was very interesting. The managing director used to get an SMS around 8 o'clock in the evening stating that what has been the collection for the day. And while we were interviewing the managing director around that time, you will find that he behaves like a fish out of water if that SMS is delayed. Because there's a single point of information that he has, a touch point, has with the rest of the organization. Now, he then wanted to have a core banking system in place. And we then had put him in touch with Infosys, and he wanted the best of the best. He came back and told, Prof, what is our best core banking system? I said, very difficult to say, but you can consider Finacle. So then we put him in touch with Infosys. And then Infosys saw opportunity in doing business, and they tried to push in Finacle. But see, because of the technology unreadiness of a credit cooperative society, they had to go through so many rounds of decision making and could not ultimately come up with adopting Finacle. Had they been able to, then they would have moved to another part of ecosystem, right? Another type of ecosystem per se. However, see how then the game changed. Because Infosys saw, one of the service providers saw an opportunity out there. They came up with something called Finacle Lite. And we had been part of discussion saying that should it be Finacle Thunder, should it be Finacle this, Finacle that, but they came up with Finacle Lite. The moment they came up with Finacle Lite, although it was started by this credit cooperative society, but there were some other matured ecosystems, not as matured as the final ecosystem that we are perhaps thinking about, which were being driven by some urban credit cooperative banks and some DCBs, who immediately started adopting Finacle Lite. Now, the moment that happened, then it immediately set the processes in place. It immediately said, start giving perhaps a bit more transparency, although not giving any idea about the demand side pool. Because at the end of the day, whether you go to a bank for taking a loan is completely your choice, right? And as independent citizens, we will keep on executing those choices. So I think instead of a supply side push, financial inclusion should also look into a demand side pool to be created, one. Second is that it becomes very difficult to actually agree that financial inclusion should be a bank's baby. If financial inclusion means that you are touching the wallet of a citizen, then by definition, different service providers perhaps will have different types of wallet shares. Now, if you are talking about different types of wallet shares, then there are mobile service providers, there are banks, there will be credit cooperative societies, there will be agricultural cooperatives, there will be different other, perhaps financial service providers. So perhaps for the decision makers and the policy makers, and this is what kind of came out, so we had got around 120 players that we did some couple of workshops, and we got everybody in one room trying to understand what are the challenges and issues and what needs to be done. Is that perhaps a separate body needs to be created that monitors the impact of financial inclusion. Let us understand, it's not about creating number of branches in villages. It's actually about changing a shift in the mindset of the end customers, saying that they will start seeing value, like you and me, going to a more structured financial service provider. Right? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Das. That was quite interesting, especially the concept of escape velocity when moving from one ecosystem to the other ecosystem. I'm more intrigued on the demand pull dimension, but I would not get into that now because the other panelists have to share their perspectives. Mr. Chari, there was a lot of emphasis on inclusion and deepening, which has to be bank-led, and the relative merits of doing that through the bank-led channel, and the primary concern being the depositors' money and the insurance that exists, also the regulatory supervision that is much more stable in the banking. So what are your thoughts and perspectives around the bank-led financial inclusion?
I think to start with the detailed address by the executive director by RBI, practically, I mean, has covered the entire gamut of issues governing financial inclusion and deepening of the financial inclusion in the Indian state. So instead of going on and I mean, being repetitive, etc., because I think for yesterday also one full day we have deliberated upon on this, various executives of banks also have spoken. I would actually like to maybe focus on something like taking off from what Dr. Das was telling, that I was just thinking, even while he was talking, viability ultimately I think is the key word. We got to have the viability. So many of us out here, so many stalls out there, all of us are here. Everybody, like he says, everybody who is looking for a wallet share. A viability is ultimately the thing. The Reserve Bank of India has mandated the banks, nationalized banks, everybody to open more and more branches in the unbankable, unbanked areas. There's a target of 25% of the branches to be open should be in the rural areas. And going forward, establishing the business correspondent relationship and then further going on into converting it into a brick and mortar, semi-brick and mortar, you can call it, in the form of ultra small branches. All this very under we have, but at the same time, the viability is so much of an importance for all of us. First of all, the banks themselves have to see the viability of opening more and more branches in the rural areas. Number one, all of us have the philanthropic objective, no doubt. All of us are here concerned of the common social good of eradication of poverty and making banking services accessible to each and everybody in this country. No doubt about that. At the same time, the cost effectiveness, the viability of it is so important. So for the banks per se, initial cost outlay is more. That is there. Go on to the next layer, the intermediary, the business correspondent who comes into the picture. For him also, the viability is so much of importance. There's so much of attrition taking place among the business correspondents. That's a big challenge for us to see that the business correspondents become viable, because the transactions are typically small ticket transactions, and the small ticket transactions, enhancing the viability, increasing the volume, increasing the number of transactions both on the deposit side as well as on the other side. All this has to role to play. Go on further, you need to have your digital connectivity. The service providers themselves are also looking for a viability in providing the connectivity across the country. We have opened so many branches. I can just speak for Indian Overseas Bank, but per se, because just before this, having in my present assignment here in Delhi, I was actually a regional manager for a rural region in the country, in Tamil Nadu. There we were the lead bank for 2 districts. The 2 years which I had there have given me a lot of experience in handling the problems which we are facing for deepening the financial inclusion. The various sectors where we have opened branches, even the service providers, even the BCs who have their handheld devices, for want of connectivity, there are delayed transactions or transactions that just do not take place. The kind of volume which they want to do during the day to have the viability doesn't happen. So we are looking at cases, for deepening I would look at cases that maybe it should not be a full-time activity for a BC. We should look for a BC to have maybe part-time. Similarly, the telecom companies, even national, you can say BSNL, was refusing to provide connectivity in a particular village where I had opened a branch. And even now I think they don't have connectivity in the branch as yet. The district administration took cudgels on behalf of the bank. It doesn't work. Ultimately, the viability comes into play. And we have so many players. It is a big business available. At the same time, opportunities are there. And at the same time, the key aspect for deepening financial inclusion, I would look at it as the executive director of RBI told, is on financial literacy. Financial literacy is every district, the banks are mandated to open a FLCCC, and FLCCC is operating, but the way they are operating, there's much needs to be done. I would say that rather the word deepening is key, because actually right now I would say in cold reality, financial inclusion actually is more on shallow waters. I think I will give it to the other speakers later on. Maybe you can react later.
Candid remarks based on the experience on the field. So, looking at bankers' experience, Madam Chatterjee, you are in the wings. That's what you mentioned yesterday. And you have a huge customer base, 5 million customers and 18,000 people serving these customers. But the model has been more a very, very standard process of both the operations as well as customer engagement. How do you see the journey of a particular business model that you have to a bank-led model of financial inclusion that the policy and regulatory environment is looking at? And if you go by the definition is access to appropriate products to all segments in a fair and transparent manner through mainstream players. So it encompasses several aspects of going from providing access to a basic account or a point of presence to the financial well-being, which his slide mentioned. So what are your thoughts?
Thank you. I will talk about from MFI perspective first, then what might happen. Okay. Now there are 2 points here. I thought that one is the access to the clients at different areas. My friend just now was sharing that from bank's point of view, they find it very difficult and it's not viable. We are operating in more than 1,800 branches, and we expand at least by 200 more branches per year. So we are able to expand. Now, and I also like to add that each one of these branch is viable. So financing the excluded is a viable proposition. It's not that it's not. It all depends that how you structure your expenditure, how you structure your infrastructure, and how you have your system in place. If all these things are coordinated together in a proper way, in an optimum way, yes, it is achievable. Now, since we have limitations that our presence to our customers, accessibility-wise, still in physical state, we have not tried anything by way of ICT. So therefore, I will not able to add anything more there, although we are very actively considering both smart cards as well as connecting our branches. Now, there is a problem of infrastructure problems that where connectivity is still not there, so we are not able to put all the branches online, but we work with a data card, and every 7-day interval we are able to get all our data together. So that's practically not giving us much of a problem. And I would also like to add here that because of the connectivity problem, our branches and the people there are so passionate about it, even at 12 o'clock in the night, if current is there, at the time they transmit the data. So there has to be a lot of attitudinal, positivity towards this work. Now let me come to the requirement of the clients. We have a single product. It's a single product industry, in fact, MFI. This is the micro loan that we give, and we work under the overall stipulations of Reserve Bank of India. So the loans, minimum 70% has to be income generating. Rest 30% where you can have some sort of other areas you can work on. And from up to 50,000 is the microfinance loan. Thereafter, it doesn't come under the priority sector status. So bankers cannot finance us for those products. So although we do have such products in the MSME segments, that we are able to do within the 15% of our fund, what we can access to. Now, within these limitations of that 30% that where we can cater to the various other requirements of the clients, what we have tried to find out is what are the basic requirements that since we finance only the women, that the lady has. I think that once a woman starts earning, immediately what strikes her is the education of her children. She's so concerned about it. So we thought that this is an area we can help them. So we have introduced an educational loan to them, and that they take once in a year. When the school starts, there is a lump sum expenditure. We finance those expenditure. Then typical of a woman also, there are a lot of health requirements. So we have also structured a health loan product. Then comes sanitation. So we have of late started that as well, building up latrines and all that. We have a fisheries product, and also in the commercial vehicle, I mean, if it is a very small thing which is coming within 50,000, fine. Otherwise, it goes to the MSME area, and we do finance the commercial vehicle. So these are the little bit of things what we have tried in the limited area that we operate. Now I will come to that much more comfortable to work with the MFI, because MFIs are much nearer to them. Much nearer to them, physical distance-wise, even mentally. I mean, they find they are very, very comfortable with us. Now, since we are very near to them, and we see to it that each one of them is served properly, once borrower's number reaches 3,000 in a branch, we do not take any more borrowers in that branch, because we think that we will not be able to serve them properly. Our people reach out to them. Every week a customer is visited, every week. So all these 58 lakhs customer is in touch with us every week. And that is probably one of the reasons that our NPA rate is so minimal. It is gross is 0.14%. I think the bankers will be very surprised to get this figure. And of course, we need not mention the net was 0.02%. So therefore, I suppose that if we do it properly and do it with a heart in this, we will be definitely reach out to these people in a much better way. And especially if you become a bank, you are able to do it in a much structured way, and with CBS in place and all other technical help available with our micro ATMs and all. Initially the process upgradation will take a little time, but it will be very, very smooth after that. Thank you.
One aspect that comes often as key requirements for both inclusion as well as deepening is the need for financial literacy and building the ability to take rational decisions and understanding the products at the household level. Though there is enough research that definitely indicates that households, in the absence of the formal financial literacy program, are quite rational in taking financial decisions. Often the policy directive indicates towards the need for financial literacy. One area where the market has caught up, both urban, rural, literate, semi-literate, illiterate, is the mobile penetration, the kind of penetration that we as a country have witnessed across all segments is phenomenal. And the companies did not invest in educating the clients on how to use them, but the people understood the value of adapting to a new technology that can add value to their day-to-day lives. So we have with us in the panel Mr. Rahman, who takes care of the mobile banking in a mercantile bank in Bangladesh. And it would be quite interesting to get your perspective, Mr. Rahman, on what do you think of building the awareness and financial literacy for financial products, whereas that was not required in a large-scale adaptation of a large mass of people to a technology that they found value in. And yours is a confluence of both these.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I am Atikur Rahman, Head of Mobile Banking in Mercantile Bank, Bangladesh. Let me share some of our experiences that we have gone through in the last few years. In Bangladesh, we have introduced mobile banking in early 2010. Last 2 years, we have made significant progress in the financial inclusion. At the very beginning, telcos were very aggressive to get themselves involved into the inland remittance business. Usually the courier service used to transfer money around the country, which were illegal, and where telcos get interested into the business. They were almost got the permission from the authority, but in the last moment, the central bank governor embargoed the decision, and it was dictated that it should be a bank-led model, where telcos can be the back-end partner for us. Our market leaders in Bangladesh is bKash and DBBL, which is the pioneer in this market. We have popularized the concept. Our mobile banking is purely a separate entity parallel to core banking operation. Core banking is having their own customers, and our mobile banking operations divisions, we have branded this one as MyCash. It has their own customer base. Core banking customers can also be tagged with mobile wallet customers. Since it is primarily targeted for the unbanked population, we made the account opening procedure and KYC pretty simple. And our board is also in a view to establish this as a separate entity or is a subsidiary company of the bank. Let me give you some statistics of there. We have 150 million people, 15% only affiliated with the banking, and 85% is unbanked. But whereas 65% is having mobile phones in their hands. So active mobile phone users is around 7 crores. So to leapfrog the situation, we have targeted those 6.5 crores low-earning mobile users. The mobile users who are earning is lower. Most of them work away from their villages, and they send money to their families very frequently. So to construct our mobile banking platform, it depends on our manpower distribution around the country, to monitor the distribution channel. Second is telco partnership. We are very working closely with our telco partners. And mobile operating platform that we have, and distribution network, which is very vital, and to promote the brand towards the people. And we are involving in operation to provide payments, purchase, and transfer. Our current scenario is for financial inclusion, Central Bank gave permission to 27 banks and some other also in the pipeline. Out of them, 18 have already been launched, this program. Around 125 crore taka transacted every day. Last 6 months, the volume has been doubled. Total agents points is around 85,000 around the country. We are not depending on the branches only. We deploy the agents. bKash is having, the market leader, is 50% of the market share, and the rest of them, other banks is sharing with 50%. Float money is around 500 crore right now, 500 to 550. Our revenue comes from transaction commission and the float money that we have from the customers and the agents, dealers. Central bank caps our the charging for 2%. I heard yesterday that here it is 3% probably. So our connectivity with the mobile banking platform through IVR, USSD, SMS, web, application for the Android and the iPhones. Our offer services, we call it the products. We have 15 products in our portfolio. We do cash in, cash out, utility payment, person to person transfer, fund management, dealer through agent, airtime top-up, sell for the telcos, FMCG collections around the country, ATM withdrawal. Though the wallet holders does not have a core banking account, they can put their PIN in an ATM and withdraw their money from their mobile wallet. We have our own DPS product, remittance from outside the country, end-to-end. We are working closely with Malaysian companies and also in the Middle East. The workers who work there, they can directly send their money to their villages. And wallet to core banking account and core banking account to the mobile wallet. We can do also the merchant payment, salary disbursement for the corporates, as well as the governments and other sectors, and some others product too. For each of the products, the commission structure is different. To manage the distribution channel, it is the most challenging and expensive. Our structure is, we have our 100 branches around the country, approximately, and we also deploy 150 plus dealers who are under our supervision, but they are authorized to bring the agents who will be our endpoint disbursement authorities. The structure of our commission is we are charging customers 1.8%. So whereas agents are getting 60% of that and 20% to the dealers for every transaction. And telcos are getting 10% and the banks and our technology partners are sharing 10%. Same type of initiatives are given for the agents and the dealers to acquire the customers. We provide campaign to put deposit at the account opening so that they can, agents, initially deposit with the initial deposit in the account opening, we are encouraging them. Agents can open the account with 2 copies of photos and a valid passport or any other IDs. We have also partnered with telcos. We are using their managed sell points by which we can get instant agent points. Of course, this sharing will be higher to them. Our government is very much at financial inclusion program. They have 2 programs. One is they have established approximately 4,000 Union Information Service Center across the country, which is a similar of your Panchayat concept here probably. We are also tied up with them in different districts of the country. Another government project is called EBEK, which is one house, one farm type of concept, which they have cooperative in the villages. They will deposit every month over there through mobile banking, and amongst them, if someone wants to get the loans, and they will be disbursed from this model and they will be repaid also banks are participating in these projects too. I believe within a year or two, the mobile banking platform will bring a change the financial scenario of our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rahman. Quite useful to know both the strategy to provide access and the range of products. So one last question to the member of the panel before we open the session for Q&A, and depends on how many questions come for us to conclude the session. To Dr. Das, in your second slide, we saw on the y-axis informal to MFI to SHG, non-bank and bank. And on the x-axis, we saw, all the way to financial well-being as the ultimate one. So what does it take for a non-bank, any entity which is not a bank, I'm not referring to NBFCs, but any entity that is not a bank, to move into a banking kind of services in your study? What is that escape velocity required?
Thank you, Anil. Look, when you're talking about the escape velocity, understand the escape is from one ecosystem to another ecosystem. Now, when you're talking about an ecosystem, the idea is that an ecosystem will have different players with non-conflicting goals who have their own end states. And if they are able to achieve their own end states well, then the ecosystem is able to achieve its own end state. For example, look at this. If I am trying to organize a birthday party for my kid, and I then try to define that this birthday party, how will this be successful, right? So then I try to define some parameters for success for the birthday party, which means other kids will feel happy, parents will feel happy and all those that. I get a magician, I get somebody who supplies ice cream, I get somebody, who is doing tattoo and all those things. Now, they have no linkage to the ultimate success of the ecosystem, which basically means that how did the party go? The party becomes successful, right? But if the magician shows magic well, if the, if the ice cream comes in its actual shape and form, if the food was good, then people feel happy and it achieves an ecosystem, its end state. So, understand that what we found is that there are at least different dimensions or kind of drivers per se. For example, presence of physical infrastructure, the demographics of the market that you are talking about, then presence of a formalization in terms of, so the ICT infrastructure will basically lead you to formal processes, better transparency, operational efficiency and things like that. Then the financial well-being of that particular market that you're talking about. Now, when you are talking about, what is that? Fuels is maybe fueling, moving a particular area from one ecosystem to another ecosystem. Majority of our studies, of our cases that we saw, is that it's the, because technology is an external factor for doing business, it's majorly is getting fueled up by presence of technology. And not only the presence, but also the right use of technology. And hence I gave the example of that Credit Cooperative Society per se. However, understand, to make this ecosystem thing successful, one of the critical aspects that we, at number of times we miss out, is creating the trust. And trust is a 0-1 thing. Either you trust me or you don't trust me. There is nothing in between. Now, if there is a banking correspondent who comes from nowhere and then comes, for example, if I ask you, Anil, I am a banking correspondent. How much money do you have? Give it to me, right? Then, and I am representing some bank. And you trust me, perhaps I take some name of a good bank, give the money to me. And then from tomorrow, for whatever reason, I'm just not there. My mobile is switched off. Now, it not only impacts, you, but it also impacts the overall, the brand value of the bank per se. So so all those parameters needs to be looked at when you're talking about moving, into another ecosystem.
Thank you, Dr. Das. So we open the session for Q&A. We'll take maybe 3 questions. Sure, sir.
If I had happened to give the impression, I think maybe that financial inclusion is not viable, it's not that nobody has that. That was not the purpose. The purpose was just to say, in fact, if it's not viable, all of us would not have gathered here, per se. The thing is that much needs to be done. Much needs to be done in terms of the kind of sensitization of even the staff in the particular banks who are operating there, to build up the social concern within themselves, bring the enhanced, make these business correspondents, in fact, the financial literacy, in my experience, I would say that it doesn't have to go only to these particular, the people for whom we want to deliver the products, but more so even to the business correspondents themselves. They themselves also need to be trained fully well, and being the local person in the particular villages, like what Mr. Das was saying, that the trust which has to be built up there are a lot of things to be done. Because, and moreover, the further thing, the more and more we deepen financial inclusion, there are, I would just like to jump topics. For right now, if you have a look, if you see the current environment, is slightly unregulated. The more and more we deepen financial inclusion and make the business correspondent model work, we got to bring in a lot of regulations, because a regulatory environment is what the banks function in. And that's the regulator, not only for banks, even for the service providers, even for the telecom, who are providing the digital connectivity, etc., etc. So that more transparency comes in the operations, and so that there are adequate safeguards built in for compliances, addressing the risks involved, making the business, because the business correspondent has to hold cash, we got to see what kind of security we provide for him. There are various aspects to it. All this has been deliberated much in depth in the previous sessions, so I don't want to go into all that. The only aspect which I want to stress upon is that there's a lot which needs to be done, and I think the august audience out here can definitely build upon this to see that we reach out more and more, and so that the financial inclusion, what the lofty objective which all of us have, and all of us have got a share in doing that. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your...
With her. The question is directed towards our friend from Bangladesh. You talked about, you introduced it around 3 years back, and some 1.8% you charge, and you have divided that percentage into various ecosystem partner bank. Agents seems to be getting the most out of it. So has anybody become viable so far?
Has anybody?
Any one of the stakeholders have they become viable so far?
Yeah, it is viable, but from the bank's perspective, we are not getting that much of money. We are not making money from the commission. We are very much dependent on the float money that we are having from the customers and the dealers through agents. I'm not sure, probably it will be revised later on, because 2% is not that much for the sustainable, for this kind of transaction.
My follow-up question was that, so has it reached, and you may not, maybe we'll connect offline also, that has it reached a certain critical mass? Have your agents, for example, who are getting the maximum share, have they become viable, or the IT partner, or you said there's a telco partner, you have bank, these are the 4 partners you talked about.
Yeah, yeah. And we have our own agents, we have our telco agents too, that they work for us. And also we are engaging the microfinance companies too, their outlets to disburse their money, or probably cash in, cash out, and other transactions too. Some people do not very much acquainted to do this kind of service. They go to the service station, the agents or the dealers, to conduct the transaction. But this 1.8% or 2%, it is very neck to neck. It's not, we are not making that kind of money, but probably we're going to review that one pretty soon. Thank you.
Yeah. Can the mic go there, please?
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, I have a question. My name is Sunny, And I guess before I ask my question, I wanted to just ask the crowd, does anybody, if you know, have you heard about Google, just by a show of hands? Most of us have? Okay, good. So seems like, so I'm from a company backed by Google. The name of our company is Buttercoin. And so over the last day and a half, we've talked a lot about financial inclusion. We've talked about the negative effects of the price of onion and inflation going up. We talked about things like microfinance. We talked about viability of how the cost of a transaction is 1.5 rupees, and therefore it gets difficult for banks to get in a big way. There's a new technology called Bitcoin. It's open source, it's decentralized, and it's free. I'm just wondering, in this room, is there anybody that's heard of Bitcoin? Okay, we've had more than a few. So our company, Buttercoin, we are looking to work with banks and financial companies to essentially enable people to use Bitcoin, which, again, if you use email, what email did to the post office, what Skype and voice over IP did to communication, Bitcoin is doing to money. And so, Bill Gates has recently called Bitcoin the tour de force. There are people from Finacle and from Infosys who have said that many banks have talked about Bitcoin in a big way, and they're showing a lot of interest. Ambani recently said yet last week that the future of India is digital currency. And if you look at the landscape of digital currency, 99% of it is Bitcoin, yet I haven't heard that being mentioned even once. So my question for number one is for Dr. Das and anybody else on the panel to take this is, how do you potentially see banks working with these new technologies that have the power to disrupt the financial world in a big way?
Very nice question. If you look at the technology aspect of financial inclusion per se, what we found is that there are actually too many suppliers and too many promises. There are too many pilots, very few scale-ups. And it's, as he was mentioning about understanding whether it's viable or not. Now, what technology will work for which institute or banking institute or financial institute in what particular geography? Because the mere presence of technology will not make any difference. It is a sociological problem of adoption, right? Now, whether the end customers will trust a particular channel and technology and how fast they will do will be, I think, one of the key aspects of whether channels get replaced.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry. You have the mic? Please go ahead, sir.
Thanks. And it's great to see Rajneesh in your new avatar.
Yeah, thank you.
So, I'm Deepak Maheshwari. I just wanted to ask one thing. You mentioned about this 7 different type of ecosystem, and you said that there's a extreme situation of deprivation where you have a zero state, and then of course there's an ultimate nirvana when all type of access to all type of services are available. Now, different type of services that you basically mentioned were more around, I'll say, banking and related, and some around payment systems, etc. But what about other type of services, let's say investment and that type of services also within that panorama that you painted? Just wanted your thoughts on that.
So this was an ecosystem prospecting per se, where the ultimate state was where you are talking about, people understanding, if you are talking about financial literacy, everything of whatever services can be provided. But these were some of the basic services that were being used in those different ecosystems. So we mentioned about those services. Somebody who doesn't have a bank account or doesn't go to a bank, rather goes to a post office, will be limited by the choice that the context provides, isn't it? So whatever services the post office will provide is whatever they will have.
Great. So one last question, and then we conclude.
Yeah, my question is directed to Mr. Das. Sir, my name is Anirudh from Ernst & Young. Sir, I want to draw the attention of the audience to the issue of capacity building among banks and business correspondents who operate at the ground level. And during your course of field study, do you think that any bank has taken some good steps towards capacity building? And could you probably describe a few of these? Because I was a part of a field study conducted in Wardha and in a small village near Ranchi. And I found that banks tend to use business correspondents for bizarre purposes. For example, collection of NPS.
I agree. Completely.
And that was not the intended purpose.
Look, tell me something. If we have celebrated some couple of centuries of State Bank of India, some couple of years ago, and with the same fact, if banks are not present in certain geographies, wasn't that a conscious choice? Now, banks are not there for doing CSR, right? That's for Ministry of Company Affairs have set some 2% limit for CSR. Now, so this is hardcore business. Now, if this is business, then it has to be viable, right? If a bank opens up a branch out there, then it means that that branch needs to be manned. Right? Now, if there is no business out there, then the bank starts bleeding. Now, where will this money come from? So, if you look at the general tendency, and that's what I mentioned about the stepmotherly approach, is that because there has been a regulatory drive, banks have to do this, right? Now, the best way then is, then it becomes a non-essential, non-core, and you outsource. So any service provider who comes and says that I will take up the pain, and I will have a skin in the business, you don't pay me now, pay me later, will be the son-in-law for the bank, per se, isn't it? That's the best model that's perhaps possible. Now, then will it be viable? Will it not be viable? Then to reduce the cost, that outsource agency naturally will try to get whoever agrees for a payment of 2,000 rupees per month. The next question comes, who will agree for 2,000 rupees per month? From a village, where he has to cover some 50 kilometers. Now, if you assume that the villagers do not know about their social, the social news, then you are wrong. If you have gone to a village, you will find, at least what I have seen, immediately people flock around. Who is this guy? And the news spreads, right? So, and hence the trust factor. So if you are picking up a wrong guy as a BC, then the whole, initiative is nipped at the bud.
Thank you very much. Shantanu, you have a question?
Yeah, because we have to close the session, so.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Divakar. I'm from Indicus Center for Financial Inclusion. It's been very interesting, one and a quarter days so far. My question is, we've heard a lot today, both from the RBI Executive Director's speech and the panelists' interactions. A lot needs to be done. I think that's a motherhood and apple pie statement, we all know. We also realize that the definition of financial inclusion as it is bank-centric, and necessarily so, because it's not just about deposits or withdrawals. It's got about the deeper products, which is absolutely fine. The question is that the challenges seem to be in the last 2 years at least, are banks and telcos, which clearly are the next big actor, are their incentives aligned? Are they working enough together? And I just raised 2 illustrations of this. Therefore, the question is more addressed to Mr. Chari. The lowest hanging fruit in terms of customer recruitment and where do you open a bank branch, I think these are the easiest areas where a telco, which has a much larger footprint, can be engaged with a bank which is deciding where to open its next 25% branches. Given the very fact that you said that you had a branch and you were asking for a telco to try and provide connectivity, shouldn't it be easy the other way around? If your target is to open 50 branches, won't you look at the places where there is already some telecom connectivity instead of then going and cribbing that the telco is not doing its job? That's one. Number 2, KYC. We have surveyed all the KYCs in the country. All of them are the same damn data. So we submit the same information. So why is it that the KYC of the bank and the KYC of the telco not aligned? This is the easiest thing that you could do, because then they are giving you customers straight away.
Yeah. The first one regarding this opening of the branch in the particular place which you were mentioning it is, I would say we learned the lesson the hard way, to be honest. Because the opening of branches in unbanked areas is basically, there's a system, I think all of you are well aware of. There's a state level bankers committee. They go into the mandate to the lead bank there, and then they allocate the villages, etc. So accordingly, we are supposed to look at places, and then the bank, when they open the villages, open the branches, they try to look for the places where they think is unbanked and where there is no other branch of any other bank not in near proximity, and then go ahead to open. So in that particular case, which we opened, it was actually a lesson learned the hard way that because that time there was a big push that you got to open branches, helter-skelter, and we just had to look at some good locations, and we opened the branches. Out of 9 or 10 branches which we opened, this one happened to be a problematic case. And obviously, but the thing is, the point which came out of that was that I was even myself, I was just sitting and thinking that we are all talking about financial inclusion, and where is connectivity inclusion? Aren't we looking at connectivity inclusion? Don't we have to even have that in place? That's the kind of question which was arising in my mind those days. So I do agree with you that when we open branches, obviously we got to see that at least to the extent of infrastructure is required by way of connectivity at least is available. So that, but further than that, I can go one step ahead. What happens is when we give the biometric machine also to the particular business correspondent, even there you have issues of connectivity. So now I was actually stressing on connectivity more in terms of the operation of this biometric machine in the hands of the business correspondent. That's why, because he is now moreover in interior villages, hamlets. That's where he's operating. And then the problem is every bank would have maybe enter into agreements of kind of arrangements with 2 or 3 telecom service providers for their CBU's operations. Now, in that particular village, where the business correspondent is working, he would be maybe, to be put it simply, like we have, let us say, with connectivity, let us say with BSNL and let us say Tata. But there, the other one works, only Vodafone works. So then what do I do? Then how do I configure now that connection, that connectivity to my CBS systems? These are all various challenges. These are all details and operational challenges, but all these things have to be taken into account when you go ahead. So, but that also, like what Madam was telling, that we did try to go for limited kind of arrangements with the other telecom service providers by way of data cards, etc., etc. So this is how it's operating. Regarding KYC, obviously in terms of KYC, because the KYC norms have been comparatively simplified by Reserve Bank of India by introduction of this basic savings bank deposit account. So in that case, which are typically no-field accounts, which were earlier called no-field accounts, they were more formalized by calling them as basic savings bank deposit accounts. And there obviously the formalities for KYC are much less. And to that extent, we are doing it. But the challenge I would like to tell you is, no, all of us have been talking for quite some time. I'm sorry, Dr. Santana sir, for taking some more time. The thing is that we are talking about rural. What happens to urban? Now, I'm here in Delhi right now. I am now trying to do financial inclusion in urban areas here. My target group I find is all migrant workers. Now, how do I do my KYC for all the migrant workers? So there also, RBI has come out with some guidelines. So these are all challenges which we are trying to address in establishing that we do open accounts and extend services, but at the same time, try to see that at least the basic identity and all the KYC is established.
Yeah, so my name is Sinha, so I'm an ex-banker. So this work, in fact, this also had occurred to us, that KYC requirement as per the mobile this thing, but there are certain differences. So there is a common covering insurance companies, covering all others, mutual fund companies and banks and also telecom companies. So if that is there, that would be a great boon, and it would be, in fact, RBI has also permitted on eKYC. But even then, whatever my friend from IOB has said, it's a problem. KYC is still a problem despite the relaxation. Say for the urban migrants, they will bring their KYC documents of their villages and all. What is the address here? Because you need the identity and the address. So these are challenges. And again, at the frontline staff, they get very scared in the kind of violations have gone on and a few months back. So they get this thing. But it is true that sensitization is very important. In fact, the bank internally itself has to feel that that's a business case. So unless there is a business case, and both as well as a social kind of concern, this has to marry. Thank you.
Well, I think I'm very pleased. Rather, the house is almost full. probably the velocity factory is working quite well, so we'll take it further down the line. Anil, I ask you to stay on because I mean, there somebody needs to moderate, and we are learning sort of thing. A final statement. I mean, basically now, a couple of questions arises. We will continue to discuss on that. I mean, very importantly, how you manage your float. So, Akyur will take it later on. You are making money out of the float, so a lot of people can learn from the tricks of the trade. And one fine line, everybody is saying that, you see, Dr. K.C. Chakravarti's latest statements or the bylines that he is making, financial inclusion is not a charity. So that means there is enough business, you try to make the most of it. And whoever bank is leapfrog into that segment, they are going to be the kings down the line. I think we have to close this session. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Probably some of the unspoken words can be taken further down in other of the there is a break down the line, but we'll continue the next session straight away. Thank you very much.
Thank you, moderator and the panelists. Now I would like to, moderator to present mementos to the speakers. First, Mr. S. Raghuvatchari. Dr. Rajneesh Das. Shri Atiur Rahman. Ma'am Ashoka Chatterjee. I'll also ask ma'am to present memento to Shri S.G. Anil Kumar. Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, moderator. I will ask all the speakers and the moderator to have a group photo.